Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today what I'm going to go through is I'm going to talk about the 3 things that you have to know about your back pain if you are to conquer it. Now this is really important for people who have had back pain for a long time. If you've seen a lot of people, you've had a lot of different opinions, you've tried a lot of different medications and exercises and stretches and therapists, both physical and psychological. There's 3 basic things that you've got to understand about your back pain if you are to conquer it. And this goes for any back pain. It doesn't matter whether you've got a disc bulge, you've got a stenosis, whether you've got sciatic pain down your legs. It doesn't matter whether you've got a disease in the spine, it's arthritic, whether you're 40 years old or 15 years old or 65 years old. Generally the symptoms that you have are your own symptoms, of course, but there's some foundational, fundamental concepts that tend to govern most people's pain or back pain that often get missed. And when we miss the root cause of most problems, we can throw a lot of different symptomatic treatments in terms of therapies and medications and things like that. But until we're addressing those root causes, it's really hard for you to fix your pain. And if you've had pain for years, that process can take a little bit longer, but if you're not addressing those root foundational causes, it's very hard for you to make any progress, let alone conquer your pain overall. So, and as a physical therapist, I speak to a lot of people, and even online, you see a lot of people are struggling with back pain. They've had it for a long time. There's so much information out there because there's so many different types of back pain. It's really easy to come across a broad spectrum of advice for what you think you have, whether that be in person or searching on the internet. So I thought instead of addressing every single different type of back pain that there is with a video, it might be nice just to go back to the foundations and say, well, look, if you can focus in on these 3 features, work hard to make sure that you see improvement in these 3 things, then you should expect to feel like you're regaining some control over your pain. And depending on where on the spectrum from acute pain to chronic pain you are, hopefully you'll feel like you get some more control back and that you can start to see some progress. Because at the end of the day, all you need to worry about is, are you making progress? And if you don't feel you are making progress, then unfortunately there's every possibility that you aren't. And the advice that you're getting and the things that you're doing aren't the things that you potentially have to do to get you to where you want to be. So hopefully that'll make a little bit more sense in a second once we delve into these 3 ideas. But the first thing I think that's really important to talk about with any pain, let alone back pain and long-term back pain, is what pain actually is. So the first concept that you have to understand about your back pain is that your pain is not tissue specific. Pain is just your brain's interpretation of threat, and that can accompany tissue damage if someone tears a hamstring or strains a disc or something like that. That can be a threat that your nervous system and brain perceives as a threat, and it generates pain to help govern your actions, tell you what to do, give you some boundaries and some guidance so that you can navigate how much you use that area to best help it heal and settle down quickly. But for some reason over the years, we've associated all pain with damage. And what's been confusing for a lot of people is that the amount of pain people have doesn't always equate to how bad or how damaged their tissue is. And anyone with long-term back pain, I'm sure will agree with me here, is that you can have a relatively okay scan that has some disc issues or some stenosis or some joint dysfunction or arthritis, but it doesn't correlate to how bad it feels for you. And you're often left scratching your head saying, well, look, I've got this extra pain that I'm being told isn't based on anything significant. Am I going crazy, or is the advice that I'm getting incorrect? And the answer, I guess, is neither. There's something else that's going on that we need to talk about. So if you can understand that all pain is your brain's perception of threat, we can start to take a step back and divorce ourselves from the physical aspect and say, well, look, let's not worry as much for the point of this conversation about the physical aspect of your pain, but we need to focus on what's generating that pain experience for you. And again, if it's based on your brain and nervous system's perception of threat, then we know that anything else that's already or concurrently threatening your brain and nervous system can feed in and wash over that pain experience. So for people who've had long-term back pain, what we often don't realize is connected is that anything else that's stressful in your life or have been stressful in the past, and in this current climate, it's quite easy to be stressed, but we're talking financial stress, time stress, work stress, physical stress, mental stress. Unfortunately, there's a subcategory here of past stress in terms of sexual abuse, excuse me, physical abuse, things that leave an indefinite mark on your nervous system, like a constant presence of threat that your body carries with it. Anything or all of these things basically act to raise the threat perception of your nervous system. And what that does is it then generates more pain on the other end. So to talk about what you can do about this, the amount of pain or the pain that you get isn't directly related to how bad your back is. It certainly feels crap and it's not very fun, but we need to get people to stop thinking that it's a one-to-one relationship where the state of your back is proportional to how bad your pain is. Or if your pain isn't going away, it's because the problem in your back isn't going away. And in essence, that's not true. So I guess a better way to think about this for anyone who is struggling to solve their back pain is that your back pain is hanging around not because there's a physical back problem still there, although there may be in some capacity. The reason why that pain's persisting is because your nervous system and brain are constantly feeling threatened, and not just by your back, but by other things as well. So we need to take that step back and realize that you're not just a back floating in space. It's attached to the rest of your body, but it's also wired through all your brain and nervous system and affected by everything else that's going on in your life as well. So we need to make sure that you're looking and trying to source areas of stress for you. Again, present stress, even horrible, nasty stress in the past that still affects you. Those things are important, and they have to, not that you can change them by clicking your fingers, but we need to make sure that how your body reacts to those stresses gets better. And one of the things that I find really useful for that is deep breathing. And if you follow along, if you follow me, if you follow along with these videos, you'll know that we're a big advocate of deep breathing in terms of the Wim Hof method or box breathing. And you can feel free to look those up. They're really important strategies that you can use to actively get your nervous system from being threatened and heightened in that constant fight or flight response, or a version of that. By deep breathing, we can get that to drop down a few gears, drop it down to a more normal baseline so that your nervous system stops feeling threatened. And only after getting you to that point where we're getting your nervous system to downregulate can we then start to see improvements in your pain. And you can have a disc that doesn't look perfect on a scan, but if you're not getting that nervous system to quieten down and to feel safer and feel less threatened, then it's hard for your pain experience to change. Doesn't matter what medications you take, how much counselling you go through. It doesn't matter what you do. Core exercises, physical therapy as well. Those things can only address certain aspects of the puzzle. If that nervous system is not functioning really well, then obviously it's hard to break through that wall. So that's the first concept to be aware of, because it's so important. If you can't master that or take steps to improve that, it's very hard to make progress, and that's where we see most people are. They're working really hard on the physical things, even the mental health things as well, but we're not chipping through that thick layer of concrete that is that heightened nervous system. So getting that down is key. As I said, breathing, or there's a number of other things that can do that, which we can talk about at a later date, but that's the first one. The second thing about most back issues, and again, it doesn't really matter what type of back issue that you have, the second important concept is you have to have mobile hips. We forget that we sit a lot. When we sit in that sort of 90-degree posture a lot, our hips get stiff. They get stuck in the one position for a long time. And again, mechanically, there's ramifications for your back because it's the next mobile section of joints and tissue above a rusty spot. So simple mechanics, if you have a mechanism that's designed to move and function really well, if you stiffen up a part of that mechanism, then all of a sudden the next available movement areas have to take up that slack, or the load gets passed from an area where you can't move this any further, so you have to do something else to make up that difference. And unfortunately what we see, a lot of people with stiff hips, tight hips, They spend a lot of time no longer bending and moving and twisting through their hips, which is where we're supposed to have all that beautiful range of motion. Instead, we end up cementing those hips and start flexing through the back, whether that be sitting, leaning forwards, standing, bending over, or just general movement that becomes a problem. So we need to make sure that if your back's become sore, degenerated, injured, whatever it may be, that you haven't got this horribly stiff handbrake below that area that's consistently asking you to load up that area without you realizing it. And there's a number of ways that we can go about freeing that up. One of the best ones that I've seen, just to demonstrate quickly, is the couch stretch. Now, you may have seen this before. Again, if you follow along, you definitely would have seen this. Ideally, this is done on a couch, so your knee's up. But we want to get you into a position where the other leg is up into a high lunge position. We want to squeeze your bum, keep your back straight, and come up nice and tall as far as you feel comfortable. We're trying to open up the front of the hip, feed some slack into the lower back, because again, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the hip flexors anchor into the front of the spine. So if this is tight, it creates this constant pull and constant tension on the front of the hip. It can also force us into one of those anteriorly tilted hip positions, which basically jams up the lower back. So freeing up the front of the hip is a must, if for no other reason than to feed slack into that lower back, but also to give you more range of motion options when you're moving around. Again, there's a lot of hip stretches. I think I did a video yesterday actually on four really good exercises with a band and one with a lacrosse ball. I'll link it above and into the description if you want to check those out. But again, concept number 2, we need to make sure that those hips are mobile. If they're not, you can be putting your back in an awkward position 100% of the time, or very close to that. And if we're going to get your back to settle down, take the pressure off your back, we've got to look above and below that. So obviously your thoracic spine can be stiff, but for the purposes of this video, you've got to go after the hip mobility, feed more slack into your back, allow it to function more normally, take the pressure off those irritated or constantly irritated structures. So nervous system's important, hips are important. Now the third part of this, again, it's not very sexy, it's very boring. There's a fair chance you've heard of this before. There's a fair chance you don't like this, but because it's boring, it's not sexy. So the third concept that you have to understand if you're going to try and solve your back pain is you've got to put it in a good position. You've got to care about your posture. You've got to care about the shapes and the positions that your back gets into every single day. What I find clinically at least is that the area that most people, I'd say almost all their lower back dysfunction is centered upon, so the area that's causing your pain, generally lines up with the position that you slouch into or bend through when you're not aware of it. And we've discussed how important the hips are in terms of mobility, and if you stiff through your hips, that can take away a lot of your movement options, which means you have to bend through your back. But when we talk about sitting posture for a lot of people, and it may feel a bit weird talking about this because a lot of people with back pain probably don't feel comfortable sitting anyway, but if you can imagine that your back pain started at a certain point, when that started, it wasn't the start of your dysfunction, it was just the time that it became sore. And if your back pain came on here, it's very likely that if this is normal, that there was a series of events and positions and things that conspired against you to get you to that threshold where it became sore, one of which is the positions you put your back into. So how that looks visually, and again, you've probably seen this a million times, but if your back pain is right down the base of your spine, or the part of your back that's become a problem and causing your pain, wherever that is, for me, for example, if we say it's this section here, for that to become a problem, there's every chance that when you're not thinking about things and you just relax through your spine and hinge back through your spine, that is the part of your back that you are hinging through without realizing it. Now, when you're sitting down on the couch and you're watching something, something really important, you're not doing anything interesting. So, and often we're not conscious of what we're doing. We're just engrossed in what we're watching or what we're doing on our phones or what we're reading or what we're doing behind the wheel. We don't take the time to engage with ourselves and just see where we are in space. So what I would suggest to people is before you sit down is to stand up in front of your seats, in a good position, up nice and tall. And then all I need you to do from here is where your back starts in this position. When you sit down on the couch or in the chair, and you can imagine my knees are at 90 degrees here, not underneath me, that position shouldn't change. And if you sit down and then you keep bending to find the rest of your, the back of the couch or the back of the seat, or you just get into a position where you're hinging, that hinge is going to be a problem over time if it hasn't become one already. So the key to solving back pain is that you have to make sure that the quality of your back positions are good enough. If they're not, it's impossible to feel good because you don't let your body feel good. You're always putting it in a position or putting it in a circumstance where it's constantly being overloaded and threatened and challenged. It becomes stiff, it becomes tight, it becomes weak. The nerves that come out from that area that supply your hips, your legs, wherever it may be, are constantly under tension, under pressure. And you can do all the strength work, you can do all the mobility exercises, you can do all the the glute strength and injections and medications. But if you then put it back in a bad position for hours throughout the day, you're either undoing that work or putting a handbrake on you getting better unnecessarily. So what I recommend to my patients is do that sit to that standing shape, to the sitting position, then make sure that you see what the difference is between your back shape and the couch or the chair or the car seat, whatever it is. Fill that gap as much as you can with something else other than your back. So instead of your back sinking sort of back into the couch, put something in there so you can't go anywhere. So you're not having to sit here feeling like an idiot up nice and tall on the edge of the couch. You can still relax, but you're supported and in a better position. So those three concepts are probably different to what a lot of people hear because we're so focused on the back tissue itself. We're so focused on trying to massage the tissue, free up the joints, free up your glutes, get everything stronger, settle down the pain. The pain's always the focus because it's so important and it's so all encompassing and all consuming, but we sort of forget that it's just a symptom of the bigger picture. And if we're missing the bigger picture, it's really hard to fix these things as quickly as they're going to settle down. So obviously, if you're in the acute phase of your back pain, there's a lot of things you can try and do to sort of address the acute symptoms. But when we're talking more globally, like I said, if your nervous system's heightened, particularly in that acute painful setting, if your hips are stiff and you just can't move anything other than your back, or when you do move, you've just trained your back to bend in a bad position, and then when you're not doing anything, you're just relaxing, you're sort of repetitively reinforcing that bad shape and consistently loading up those tissues in a less than ideal way, it's hard for that back to settle down. So again, as a physical therapist, there's a lot of treatment things that we can do to help you feel better, but those three ideas are non-negotiables. If you don't feel like you're working on those and feel like you're making progress with those, everything else, you can't guarantee that it'll make any impact, let alone get you to where you want to be feeling good again. So hopefully that information helps in some small way. If you are someone who's struggling with back pain at the moment, please feel free to reach out to us. Leave a like below, comment below, subscribe to the channel just to keep in touch with us. Ask us any questions that you need to. We want to help. We want to make sure that you can specifically treat your aches and pains, but also give you some guidance that that things can get better despite maybe some crappy information that you've been given before, or a lack of progress, or a lack of hope that you've been given. So, but hopefully today I can at least shed some light on why your back might be sore in the first place. And then regardless, I guess when you then filter back in the specific nature of your issues, whether it is a disc bulge or a stenosis or a nerve root impingement or sciatica, whatever it might be, think of those separate issues as different expressions of a root dysfunction. And then if you can think of it like that, as we start to improve the way everything functions around that, then you'll hopefully see an improvement in your symptoms, hopefully very quickly, but at the very least you should see some change. So with that being said, I hope this is useful. Please reach out to me, communicate with me below, and us in general. But until next time, best of luck, and I'll talk to you soon.